give him a fantastic, warm, noisy reception.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I decided the web would be easier if we all spoke English. Now, I went to w3text.com last week, and we can see 51% of all the websites in the world are in English. Right, so how many of you are actually being asked to develop stuff that can be in other languages? Yeah? Waste of time. Yeah, complete waste of time, because not only is 51% already in English, but all these guys, they all speak English anyway. Yeah? And let's face it, designing for the web in other languages gets really difficult. I mean, if you do German, German, the wonderful language that doesn't have a space bar. Yeah, the longest words in the world. The German embassy actually tweeted on the day that Twitter introduced 288 characters. Great, we can use it again. So then you got French. I mean, French is a strange language because it has lots of these little squiggles that go above words. Interestingly, cedilla, which is the squiggle that goes below the letter, the word in French uses the sound that the cedilla is for, but with a different accent. Yeah, so where's the logic in that? Hebrew and Arabic, they're going to flip your website completely the other way around, except when they don't. Like Arabic Windows has the home button on the right-hand side. Makes sense. Hebrew Windows doesn't. They have it on the left-hand side, even though all the text is going the other way around. So it starts to make everything really stupid. Now, Russian, yeah, different font set, different character set, different parts of the alphabet, letters that look familiar, which actually are something completely different. Yeah, okay, move on. So the web is English. How more English can it be? It was invented by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Forget about the suit there. He couldn't be more English than that with a name like that. Now, unfortunately, we live in a world where there is apparently, most people think there's two English languages, British English and American English. As the Queen says, there is no such thing as American English. There is English and there are mistakes. Now, Joomla, as Royd said, it's 4% of all the websites in the world. It's open source software. And it's, as far as I know, it's the only open source CMS where the default language is British English, which is quite a challenge because I'm the only one of the thousands of people who contribute to it that actually speak British English. That's probably why I've got so many pull requests and commits. So the web itself, in general, is in English. So why is that? Well, 95% of the websites in the world use JavaScript, 83% PHP, and 95% use CSS. No idea what the 5% not using CSS are doing, but that's what W3Text tells me. Now, is JavaScript English? Well, the three major people in JavaScript's history, Brendan, who's the original inventor of JavaScript, he's American. Waldemar, who wrote the ES specifications, I couldn't actually find out where in the world he's from, but with a name like that, I think it's fair to say he's not from Manchester. And John Ressig at the end, who wrote jQuery, also American. So it's not English, and we know that because they write var $ equals variable name. We all know what it really should say. What about PHP? So PHP is the language that I use most of the time. Three kind of founders of it. Rasmus is from Greenland. Zev and Andy are both from Israel. But if you know Zend, it's Ze and Und from their names. Now, in PHP, there's even error messages that are in Hebrew. Yeah, does anybody actually know what this error message is?
Missing scope resolution operator.
What?
Oh, not missing, sorry.
Missing double colon. Yeah, so I'm not the dev, you're the dev. So you got a geek version and a real version, but they even shove the Hebrew is in the error messages, so it's not very good. And CSS, it gets worse. CSS is invented by this gentleman, who I'm not going to disrespect by attempting to pronounce his name. He is Norwegian, and he was the CTO of Opera. We know he's not English because this is a fairly standard piece of CSS, full of 4 spelling mistakes. So what is going on? The web should be English, and yet it's in this other language that's not English. So I set myself a challenge last year, and I wanted to see, I've made all the language strings in Joomla British English. I've made all the documentation English. I've made all the block quotes English, all the headers English. But I'm still stuck with the CSS, the PHP, and the JavaScript in this other language. I wanted to see, could I fix it? So I sat down, and yes, I could. So let's just have a look at some basic CSS. We can see here highlighted the spelling mistakes. So let's fix those. So obviously colour gets a U and grey is with an E, etc. Important. I know you should never use important in your code, but we all do, let's face it. Isn't it nicer just to say please? What about this one? Bold becomes plump. Background image, it's not an image, it's a background photo. And of course, no one is going to have a background photo of the president. It has to be the Queen. So she's happy. And when I was researching this, I discovered that actually there is a thing called spiffing CSS. And it's available in 2 different versions, whether post CSS or just a native version. And you can actually use this to write your CSS correctly in English. And then it will convert it for the American browsers. So you can write in English. It's perfectly correct. Now we get to PHP. A little bit harder. This is some fairly standard PHP. If you're not familiar with it, every PHP bit of code starts with chevron question mark PHP and ends with question mark chevron. What it really should say is, our coding shall begin at once, and that was it, my good fellows. We get, also, this is a fairly standard piece of code, if and else if. Of course, that's not unique to PHP, it's in probably every language. That would be much better written, in case it is true that, and on the possibility it's something else, could you please do this? So we've done that. Now we have a switch statement where we're switching between the case and default. Again, fairly standard code. But what we really mean to say is, what about, perhaps, and on the off chance? And then, of course, we've got all the dollars, so we don't need to go on. We just need to change all of those to pound signs. Because and that other language that calls itself English that isn't English, they sort of call that the pound sign, but they also call the hash symbol the pound sign. So how they ever get anything right, well, I have no idea. But moving on. So now we have a try catch statement. Of course, try is would you mind, and actually I do mind. And most code, in some way or another, when something goes wrong, you want to have a die and output a message. Die? Really? Do you want someone to die just because the code wasn't great? Cheerio. It's much nicer. We've now got British PHP, the Queen is happy. Again, I was amazed. Go to GitHub, it's there. This guy has recompiled PHP from source, correcting all the mistakes. There's another link to it here. If you don't want to recompile it yourself, you can just go there to download it. The web is now finally correctly in English, with no mistakes, no errors, no pretense that it's in a language that pretends to be English. You know, it's fake news that that language is English. It's not. We can now give the web what Sir Tim Berners-Lee always wanted, the royal seal of approval. And on that note, with 20 seconds to go, I'll say thank you very much.